Welcome to Unleash the Awesome with Dave Gambrill. All of us have unique skills, talents, and abilities that aren't being used to their full potential. Our mission is to share the people, tools, apps, and other resources that will help you unleash your awesome on the world.
Yo, what's up? It's Dave. Welcome to another episode of Unleash the Awesome. Today, let's talk about what got you here will not get you there. Yeah, what got you here will not get you there. And what spurred this idea for today's conversation was watching Sydney McLaughlin run the 400-meter hurdles. If you're not familiar with who she is or her story, I will put a link in the show notes to an article in Sports Illustrated that you can go read. But the basic idea is Sydney McLaughlin is absolutely crushing it in the 400-meter hurdles, continually breaking records, sometimes going back-to-back breaking records with another really fast runner, Dalilah Muhammad. But for the last couple times, she has been breaking her own records time and time again. And the last time she did it, she shaved like 0.7 of a second, which is unheard of in a race like that. And I think it had been years, or like never before, like 2019 has anybody run like as fast as she's running now. And then they shave like 2 seconds off that time. It's really incredible. It's insane, actually. It's like superhuman. And so what made me think about this was reading that article, right? So if you think about Olympic athletes, you think about anybody that's at the top of their game, anybody that's really on the path of mastery, working on their craft, right? They build up skills and muscle memory and routines and habits and things that get them to a point. And in some cases, it's been years and years and years. Sydney McLaughlin, I believe, is 22, so I don't know how long she's been running track and field, but even if it's just been for a few years, like she's got a few years and probably hundreds, if not thousands of miles run on a track, 400 meters at a time, where her body is used to doing something at a certain speed and a certain rhythm and a certain cadence and a certain timing. And like, I would imagine a lot of it is just automatic at this point, right? She is trained so hard that she probably doesn't think about what she's doing. And so it got her to the point where she was world class. She's winning gold medals. She's breaking records. But then when you read the article, this was the most fascinating thing to me. So she got to a point where she was running fast and breaking records, and she came out on the scene and did her thing. And then right around the time of the pandemic, she decided she was going to change her coach. And she went with a coach who's been around the sport forever. Nobody understands hurdles in particular more than the coach that she selected. And so she went with this guy, and he has coached other world-class Olympic gold medal record-breaking athletes, right? So there's one of your first key takeaways. If you're going to take advice from people, one, either take advice from people who are already doing what you want to do. So if she found another runner that would coach her, that would be good. But if you can't find that, find somebody who has coached other people through it, right? So they have their own results. So in this case, she went with a coach who had other runners, other hurdlers, sprinters that had world-class success and record-breaking success. So she changed her coach, even though she was at the top of her game. Okay, so what got her here, she knew was not going to get her to the next level, because essentially there's a new devil at every level. She changed her coach during the pandemic. And then this is the mind-blowing part. I guess, and I could be getting some of this slightly wrong. It's been a few days since I read the article, but you can go read it yourself if you want. But I guess between the hurdles, essentially, she was running, taking 15 strides. And this coach, who she trusted implicitly because she definitely knew he knew what he was doing, the coach said, I want you to run it in 14 strides. So think about this. I just said for years, her neuromuscular conditioning, her muscle memory, her habitual way of doing things was getting out of the starting gate and then however many strides to the first hurdle, maybe it's 15. I don't know that much about the 400-meter hurdles. But then in between every single hurdle, it was 15 strides. And like her body was just like, okay, 15 strides and then I jump, 15 strides and then I jump, 15 strides and then I jump. So what he said was, I want you to do it in 14. So it's changing all that muscle memory that she had built up that got her to be a world-class, record-breaking gold medal athlete. He said, I want you to change it to 14, which also meant not only was this timing messed up and she had to take bigger strides, but she also had to jump off her other foot in order to do this. So I think she was jumping off her right foot, and now she had to jump off her left foot. For mere mortals like you and I, this would be the equivalent of writing with your dominant hand your whole life. So your right hand for most of you, but in my case, I'm left-handed. And then having someone say to you, I want you to write with your other hand, and then I'm going to enter you in a world-class handwriting championship in 30 days. I mean, if you ever try to write with your other hand, you understand what that's like. If in sports you've ever tried to do a layup in basketball with your other hand, right? Just trying to get the steps right and the timing right of all of those things. It's like, it's so crazy because you have to unlearn so much. And I did a podcast episode on that. I'll make sure I link it in the show notes about unlearning is the hardest part of learning something new. So in this case, Sydney had to unlearn a lot of what she'd already known to this point and then reprogram herself to do 15 strides and take off from her other foot. And then also with that, make sure that she wasn't jumping too high over the hurdles, because all that time in the air and all the time coming down to the track is precious time that ticks off the clock. So how can you just barely clear the hurdles with enough distance to not hit them and then continue to do your 15 strides to the next hurdle and so on and so on? So if you watch her races, I would encourage you to go Google it or YouTube it or whatever. You'll see that now that she's done that and she's gotten good at it and proficient at it, she is crushing it even more. And like I mentioned already, she has knocked like 0.7 of a second off her last thing, which it had been years since anybody had knocked any appreciable time off from the record. And now she's breaking her own records. Like I mentioned, she was going back and forth with another runner, and now she's just breaking her own record. She's essentially racing herself or racing the clock now. And now that she's changed to this new method, she's crushing it all over again. And it's almost comical to watch. You watch the race and it's like, okay, there go all the runners. And then it's almost like she has a rocket attached to her or something. It's like, okay, the first hurdle, they're kind of close together. Second hurdle, they're kind of close together. And then it's just like, zoom. It's like watching a cartoon, like Speedy Gonzales or something. She's just like, boom. And then she takes off. I think somebody said, I think it was in the article, like she could have stopped running and turned around and looked at people and then started up again and still finished and won. All right. And so the reason I'm sharing this story with you today is this is one of the hardest things to navigate, because if you think about this, she changed almost everything about her technique on race day. But she probably didn't change very much as it relates to her nutrition and her supplementation and her sleep habits and her training days, and like when she went heavy and when she went light, and how she changed her training leading up to a race and what her rest routine looked like and all that stuff. She probably didn't change much of that, right? The fundamentals are the fundamentals, right? So a lot of the things that got you there, you can continue to use, but she changed some of the biggest things that got her to that point that then took her to the next point. And so this is tough to navigate, friends, because you get to a certain point and then you have to look at it. And this is why having outside counsel, like a world-class coach who's been doing this his entire career, essentially. But you got to find somebody in your, whatever it is you're trying to do, that can look at it and say, okay, you know what? It looks like these things that you're doing are probably working for you, and they can probably continue to work for you. So let's not change those. Let's not just throw the baby out with the bathwater. Let's not get rid of everything. But we may have to crack a few eggs to make an omelet, as they say, right? We might have to break a few things. We might have to change some of these things that seem like sacred. Like, no, like, can you imagine if somebody came to you and said, you pretty much have to change the whole thing you do on race day, your whole technique. You have to change it all. Like, for most people, you'd be like, no, thank you. I'm going to go get another coach. Right? But if you really trust that person, if you really trust that advice, and they've gotten results for other people, and you wanted to get better, then you would take that risk and say, okay, like, let me try to do it. And you see it in other sports too, like in golf, where sometimes golfers hit like a plateau and then they get a new swing coach or a new putting coach, or sometimes in baseball, right? You see these things where like people get to a certain level, and then when they bring in another coach, the coach looks at them and says, okay, I want you to change this thing. And sometimes it seems like a little thing, but it's such a big thing. Like, it seems little when I say, oh yeah, just run 14 strides instead of 15. And oh yeah, just take off on your other foot. But if you try to do any of that stuff, if you just conceptualize that, or think about the example I gave you about writing with your other hand, that's insanely difficult, and especially at a world-class level. So my encouragement to you today would be, think about what it is you're trying to do, the path of mastery that you're on, whether it's a hobby or your side hustle or your career or whatever. Like, if you've gotten to a point and you feel like there's some stagnation or you've plateaued, I encourage you to look at, okay, what got you there, and what are the things that will continue to work for you? What are the habits and strategies and techniques and tactics that will continue to have you get to the next level? Like, they'll help you. But then what are some things that you could tweak or maybe change outright and take a big risk on that will help you get to the next level? I know for a lot of people, when I used to do a lot of corporate training and I worked internally in a corporate environment as an employee, I know one of the biggest things that was holding people back was public speaking or presentation skills. Right? So whatever got them to that point, and then they had to get promoted to like a manager level or director level, like you spend more time as a manager and a director and a VP and all those, like presenting to other people and presenting your key ideas and topics. And you might be the smartest person in that subject, right? You might be the SME, the subject matter expert. They used to call it, I hated that term, SME, subject matter expert in that thing. But if you can't communicate it in a way that makes sense to other people, especially people that are outside that domain of knowledge, then you're going to be at a really bad spot. You're not going to be able to take things to the next level. The communication skills and the presentation skills that got you to that level are not going to help you get to the next level. Like, maybe you already got the promotion, but you're not going to get any raises, and you're certainly not going to get promoted to the next level if you can't figure out how to give cogent, meaningful presentations to an audience of people who don't understand what it is you're talking about. You have to translate it to them. And so you can't use some of the examples and other things. And you probably need to learn how to speak in, like you hear me do a lot in this podcast, similes and metaphors and telling stories and relating things. Like, in this very podcast, I talked about, like, I don't think any of us listening, or me included, could understand what it's like to be a world-class Olympic athlete. Although maybe you are. I have actually worked with some, coached some, but most of us can't relate to that. And so I said, hey, it's kind of like trying to learn how to write with your other hand, right? That's just a simple analogy, but as you conceptualize that or you try to do that, you're like, whoa, that's difficult, right? So when you learn how to teach like that or train like that or present like that, right, that is something that will help you at the next level. And I'm telling you, most of the time when I was brought in to do some remedial work with people at the director level, the VP level, whatever, it was on their presentation skills. They definitely knew what they were talking about. They were subject matter experts. They knew more about it than anybody in the entire place. Sometimes anybody in the entire niche or industry. But I'm like, listen, man, you're just talking over everybody's head. You need to figure out how to translate this, communicate it in a different way, come up with some stories, metaphors, similes, whatever, so that people can understand it, right? So what got them there, the skills, talents, and abilities that got them there as an individual contributor, was not going to get them to the next level. And so they need to fundamentally change how they communicated, because they couldn't communicate the same way they were communicating to their team because their team understood it. But if they kept communicating that way to everybody else in the organization or external to the organization, not many people are going to get it. It was like, so if you ever had, here we go with another simile or metaphor or whatever teaching story, right? Many of you can probably relate to the idea of having a teacher in high school or college that you knew was like the smartest person in the world, but they just taught right over your head because they taught at their level and how they were thinking about it, but they weren't translating it to a way that made sense to you. But then maybe you went to office hours or to a teaching assistant or a tutor or something, and they gave you a different analogy or they gave you a different example or they just said it in a different way. And you're like, oh my gosh, that makes sense. I totally get it now. It would have been better if they had done that the first time, but getting a few repetitions of it and then hearing it in a different way from a different story, a different metaphor, different simile, whatever, that helped you understand it, right? And so same kind of deal, like even in the classroom, what got you to that level is not going to get you to the next level. Sometimes you sit in a class and you listen to the instructor, and that's fine. And you take a handful of notes and you don't really have to do a whole lot. But then when you get to the 201 and 301 level courses and the subject matter gets even more in depth, you might have to actually then go to office hours and go talk to the teaching assistant and go to tutoring and talk to your peers and get into study groups, which may be something that you've never had to do before. But now you're at a new level. Now you're at university. Now you're at college. Now you're in the graduate level programs and courses, right? So maybe it's time that you have to employ some of those techniques and tactics to help you. So my encouragement today would be for you to think about whatever it is, whatever path of mastery you're on, whether it's a hobby, your career, your side hustle, whatever. Think about where you are. Think about how you've arrived at where you are right now and the success that you've had. But then give a really good thought. Think about, what are some things that I probably need to change in order to get things to the next level? If you want that promotion, if you want that raise, what are some things, if you want to make more money in your business, what are some things you need to do differently? Maybe you need to do less of some things, right? Addition by subtraction. Maybe you need to do less of some things, delete some things, or delegate some things. And maybe you need to do more of things that you're already doing. Maybe it's just a volume thing, or maybe you need to do something totally different. And the only way to really know is to think about this and then try. Try. The learning is in the doing. So you're going to have to try it at some point and see if it works and measure it, right? I did a podcast episode a couple episodes ago about if you're not assessing, you're guessing. So as you make these changes, then measure it. Get some feedback. If you can measure it with actual numbers, like if you can weigh it or measure it like through a study or something, right? If it's something tangible that you can like get some numbers on, get some real feedback on, then do it. But again, in the corporate space and other places, maybe they use NPS scores or 360-degree feedback or whatever. When you get that kind of feedback, then you'll know, like, am I on the right track? Is this working? Sydney McLaughlin knew just from looking at the times on her 400-meter hurdles that, like, oh, this is working because I'm breaking records. I'm still breaking records, right? But for you, it might be more subtle. You might have to get some feedback from peers or some of that formal 360-degree feedback. Or if you have a business, then maybe you'll see your revenue go up or you'll see your customer retention improve or whatever. All right. So make sure you measure this. Like when you make the change, make sure that you measure it, because then you could say, yeah, I made this change and it seems to be like we've eliminated other variables. And so it seems most likely that this change we've made is resulting in this better result. And so then we're going to continue to do this, or we're going to even ramp this up and kick this up a little more. Right? Because sometimes more is better, not always. Right? And so maybe you do a little more and you see, and maybe you find out more isn't better. And then you just kind of go back to where that balance was for you. And then you just play there for a while and you realize, okay, cool. We're breaking records, or we're getting new revenue, or we're whatever. This is good. We're getting better grades in my classes. This is good. We're going to hang here for a while because now you figured out how to adapt at that new level, because what got you here won't get you there. So now that you're there, because you've changed a few things, then you hang out and you get some called homeostasis. You just kind of like, okay, this is the new normal. We've broken through the ceiling and made it the floor. Okay, cool. Here we are at this new level. And then inevitably something's going to happen where you're going to have to change again, right? That's what life is all about, evolving, right? Survival of the fittest. Right? And if you don't evolve before your workplace forces you to evolve, or your business forces you to evolve, then it's usually more painful when that evolution is being forced on you from the outside. So if you think about what I'm talking about in this episode and then say, okay, let me evolve before I need to, there's still pain involved there, because you still have to change some things, and it's not, it's messy, but it's not as messy or as painful as it could be as if you're forced to do it under a more compressed timeline. Right? So if you can be more proactive about this stuff, it will certainly help you. And when you do all of this stuff in combination, just like Sydney McLaughlin is breaking records, when you do this kind of stuff, it will help you unleash your awesome on the world. See you.
Thanks for listening to Unleash the Awesome. Please be sure to subscribe, rate, and review wherever you listen to your podcasts. And please share us on your favorite social media platforms using #UnleashAwesome.